The Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Investment will come to order. Welcome, everyone. I note that a quorum is present. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on workforce innovation and opportunity at reauthorization, creating opportunities for youth employment. This is an entirely remote hearing. All microphones will be kept muted as a general rule to avoid unnecessary background noise. Members and witnesses will be responsible for unmuting themselves when they are recognized to speak or when they wish to seek recognition. I also ask that members please identify themselves before they speak. Members should keep their cameras on while in the proceeding. Members shall be considered present in the proceeding when they are visible on camera, and they will be considered not present when they are not visible on camera. The only exception to this is if they are experiencing difficulty and inform committee staff of such technical difficulty. If any member experiences technical difficulties during the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, whose number was provided to you in advance. Should the chair experience technical difficulty or need to step away to vote on the floor, Mr. Takano or another majority member is hereby authorized to assume the gavel in the chair's absence. This is an entirely remote hearing, and as such, the committee's hearing room is officially closed. Members who choose to sit with their individual devices in the hearing room must wear headphones to avoid feedback, echoes, and distortion resulting from more than one person on the software platform sitting in the same room. Members are also expected to adhere to social distancing and safe health care guidelines, including the use of masks, hand sanitizer, and wiping down their areas both before and after their presence in the hearing room. In order to ensure that the committee's 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time using the committee's field timer. The field timer will appear on its own thumbnail picture and will be named 001 timer. There will be no 1 minute remaining warning. The field timer will show a blinking light when time is up. Members and witnesses are asked to wrap up promptly when their time has expired. While a roll call is not necessary to establish a quorum in official proceedings conducted remotely or with remote participation, the committee has made it a practice whenever there is an official proceeding with remote participation for the clerk to call the roll to help make clear who is present at the start of the proceeding. Members should listen carefully. Members should say their name before answering and announcing they are present. This helps the clerk and also helps those watching the platform and the live stream who may experience a few seconds delay. At this time, I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Chairwoman Wilson.
Congresswoman Wilson, present.
Mr. Takano.
Congressman Takano, present.
Ms. Jayapal. Ms. Omar. Ms. Ledger Fernandez.
Jayapal is present. Sorry.
Mr. Jones. Ms. Manning.
Present.
Mr. Bowman.
Congressman Bowman is present.
Mr. Pocan. Mr. Castro. Ms. Sherrill. Mr. Espaillat. Mr. Grijalva, Mr. Courtney, Ms. Bonamici,
Suzanne Bonamici is present.
Mr. Scott,
Mr. Scott is present.
Ranking Member Murphy,
Dr. Murphy is present.
Mr. Grossman, Ms. Stefanik, Mr. Banks, Mr. Comer, Mr. Fulcher, Mrs. Miller Meeks, Mr. Good, Mrs. McLean, Mrs. Harshbarger,
Harshbarger present.
Mrs. Sparts, Ms. Letlow,
Letlow is present.
Mrs. Fox, Chairwoman Wilson. That concludes the roll call.
Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, opening statements are limited to the chair and the ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I recognize myself now for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, we meet for the first 3 bipartisan hearings focusing on reauthorizing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It was last reauthorized in 2014 and is commonly referred to as WIOA, which is the foundation of our nation's workforce development system. The hearing will focus on 3 youth programs: Youth Workforce Investment Activities, Youth Bill, and Job Corps. These programs provide low-income, in-school and out-of-school young people ages 14 to 24 with job opportunities, pathways to further education or training, and basic support services that help them find good paying jobs. This is a timely and important movement. This is a moment to invest in our youth-focused initiatives because millions of young people in communities across the country are struggling to cope with the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Anywhere from 6 to 10 million young people were estimated to be disconnected from school and work at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, compared to roughly 4 million in 2019. WIOA funded programs are a critical tool to create opportunities for these young people. This bipartisan reauthorization effort is a chance to make important improvements to help ensure that they can reach their full potential. One area of improvement is better allocation of youth workforce investments, which received just over $920 million in fiscal year 2021. Under current law, no less than 75% of WIOA funds must be used to serve out-of-school youth. This effort to target funding to the most vulnerable group of young people has unfortunately had an unintended consequence. Programs are often forced to wait until a struggling student is fully disconnected from school to offer their services. Such a delay creates unnecessary barriers that result in missed opportunities to intervene earlier and keep students in school. Another area for improvement is expanding paid work-based learning opportunities. Connecting young people with jobs where they can build skills is vital to their long-term success. Studies show that teenagers who have a job between the ages of 16 and 18 are more likely to earn higher wages as adults. increasing the funding for these programs and extending forms of work-based learning to include job shadowing, job preparation, and youth apprenticeship programs could make a meaningful difference in our communities. Today, we will also explore improvements to Job Corps, which provides tens of thousands of young people across 50 states with residential education, vocational training, and job placement services. I have heard from countless community leaders and residents who credit Job Corps with transforming their lives, which is why I have championed this program throughout my career in public service. I am extremely proud of the Job Corps Center in my district, and I have bragging rights because it is ranked #1 in the country in programming in the 2019 year based on performance indicators. Job Corps enjoys widespread bipartisan support, and I hope we can find bipartisan agreement to make it even more effective. This includes changing the counterproductive zero tolerance language enacted during the Clinton administration, which requires automatic dismissal of young people for alcohol abuse, minor drug offenses, and other infractions that would instead be met with more reasonable and helpful interventions like counseling and treatment. Blanket drug testing with follow-up tests being required even before the chemicals may fully have left a student's body have led to roughly 12,500 expulsions, 91% of which were from marijuana use. Today, recreational marijuana use is either legal or has been decriminalized in nearly half of our states. As with any organization, Job Corps' success relies on the quality and the stability of the staff. Job Corps has struggled to retain its best teachers, counselors, nurses, and managers because it cannot pay competitive wages in the locality. For that reason, we should consider whether to remove the exemption for Job Corps contractors from the Service Contract Act, which would set a wage floor for Job Corps Center employees that is pegged to comparable local wages. Without that protection, Job Corps centers cannot compete for instructional talent with local public school districts, which is needed to reduce staff turnover, which undermines the performance of the program. Of course, the most important improvement we can make to all VIOA programs is to increase their funding. Job Corps has been underfunded relative to its authorization level by at least $120 million each year for the past 5 years, and more than $239 million in the last year alone. Youth workforce initiatives have been underfunded relative to its authorization level by an aggregate $150 million since 2016. We get what we pay for. No program can be expected to meet the needs of our communities while we consistently underfund it every year. Today's hearing kicks off a vital effort to give at-risk young people the support they need to lead fulfilling lives and will make our communities much, much stronger. I look forward to working with my colleagues to reauthorize the WIOA, and I now recognize the distinguished ranking member for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. Congratulations on your program's #1 ranking. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Our conversation today could not be timelier, as we know that young people's ages 16 to 24 are experiencing a decline in employment and labor force participation. In fact, last year in July, the labor force participation rate for the ages was the lowest going back to July of 1948. when the Bureau of Statistics first began reporting the statistic. The aim of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the WIA youth programs, is to prepare young adults to embark on successful, fulfilling careers, and is necessary for a prosperous workforce. As such, I'm thankful that reevaluating these important programs is a task that House Republicans and Democrats are tackling together. Before we jump into reauthorizing these programs, we should also carefully examine where they can better serve youth, as it appears there is room for improvement to live up to the promise of the last reauthorization. For example, Job Corps exists to assist disadvantaged youth, providing them with career and technical education and connecting them with the labor force. This program was allocated $1.7 billion in fiscal 2021, but has faced significant difficulties in the past, both in maintaining safety and security for program participants and improving their job prospects. For this program to serve its purpose, we must reevaluate where the program has failed in the past and increase accountability to ensure that these programs do not persist and that the youth who take part in Jobs Corps are put on a course that is successful to their pursuing their careers. More broadly, the workforce system is too often siloed and disconnected from regional economic development needs and is not agile enough to adapt to emerging demands from businesses. How we allocate money always matters, but when it comes to the programs that are preparing our kids for their future, it's also much more about dollar signs. For the economy to flourish, it is imperative that our nation's youth are well prepared to enter the workforce. For the sake of our taxpayers and our children, we cannot blindly funnel money into programs without first considering what works best and what is needed by employers in the region where the children live. However, if we ensure that employers are at the table and the system is focused on meeting the needs of Americans' youth and young people, House Republicans believe that the WIA youth programs will fulfill their promise to our nation's kids. As we begin conversations on a bipartisan reauthorization of WIA, I'm asking that my Democratic colleagues continue to work with us to ensure that these programs not only are well funded, but they meet their primary goal of preparing Americans' youth for meaningful careers before we figure out if these programs need to grow. I know that we all have the best interests of Americans' children at heart, and that gives me great hope as we work together to optimize these programs. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will yield back.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. And without objection, all other members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5:00 p.m. on Thursday, May 27, 2021. I would like to enter for the record a letter from the National Association of Home Builders in support of strengthening Job Corps and youth bill without objection. I will now introduce the witnesses. Ms. Shakima Fulmore Townsend. Ms. Shakima Fulmore Townsend is the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Youth Network. In this role, she draws on her experience in research, social work, and systems change to lead the creation of coordinated systems that promote academic achievement, economic opportunity, and personal success. Mr. Thomas Showalter is a senior advisor at the National Youth Employment Coalition, where he leads work on education and workforce policy and related areas, including disability policy, juvenile justice, anti-poverty programs, as well as federal policy development. Ms. Deb Littner. Ms. Deb Littner is the Human Resources Manager for Pre-Corps in Whitsett, North Carolina, where she leads the workforce planning and development, organizational development, employee relations, and leadership development for the company. Mr. Brian Garrett is the president and CEO of the National Job Corps Association, a national organization representing the 121 active Job Corps campuses and their staff, the youth service providers who manage the campuses, and the thousands of students who Job Corps annually serves. Welcome to every one of you. Thank you so much for joining us on this most important forum. We appreciate your taking the time to be with us today and to lend all of your knowledge and advice to our committee. I want to remind the witnesses that we have you and all of us on our committee have read your written statements. And these written statements will appear in full in the hearing record. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and committee practice, each of you is asked to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. Before you begin your testimony, please remember to unmute your microphone. During your testimony, staff will be keeping track of time, and a light will blink when the time is up. Please be attentive to the time. Wrap up when your time is over, and then re-mute your microphone. If you experience any technical difficulties during your testimony or later in the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, whose number was provided to you in advance. We will let all the witnesses make their presentations before we move to member questions. And remember, when answering a question, please remember to unmute your microphone. The witnesses are aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee, and therefore we will proceed with their testimony. I will now recognize Ms. Fulmore Townsend. Welcome.
Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Shakima Fulmore Townsend, and I'm the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Youth Network, known as PYN. Our vision is to use education and employment experiences to interrupt the cycle of poverty. We connect young people 12 to 24 years old to the skills and mindsets needed to thrive in school, career, and ultimately life. Our work promotes equity in access and outcomes, especially for the most vulnerable in Philadelphia. We value youth voice and seek to empower young people to shape their destiny. We use collective impact to drive results and are not shy about our beliefs that all young people are full of potential, powerful, and capable of great progress. At PYN, we do not work in a silo. Together with our partners, PYN has provided more than 225,000 opportunities. We have learned a lot about sustaining scalable results. Madam Chair, life has been very difficult over the past 15 months for all of us, including young people. The expectations of work have changed, which means our strategies and approaches must advance to meet the needs of the next generation. Disruptive events like the global pandemic, economic and health disparities, and the racial awakening we are all facing forces us to confront systemic and institutional bias with swift action to close gaps in educational achievement and economic earnings for vulnerable youth. Across the nation, local workforce boards and youth-serving organizations are employing new strategies and strengthening partnerships. I know from personal experience the courage it takes to be a cycle breaker in your family. I am a social worker today because at 14, in my first job, I learned that helping was actually a career. For many young people, the first step to a prosperous future lies in the programs that WIOA supports. I am truly humbled to share my thoughts here today. My first, communities are unique and policy works better with flexibility. Reconsider the requirement of 75% funding threshold required for disconnected youth. Holding to this ratio means we must wait until youth are disconnected to serve them, rather than take preventative measures to keep them engaged and on track to meet their education and employment goals. Let's simplify the enrollment process by using a set of risk indicators for disconnection. Youth served should meet at least one of the risk indicators rather than overemphasizing in-school or out-of-school status because the needs are similar despite the definitions. Prioritize quality and continuous improvement. Consider incentivizing approaches that embed literacy and numeracy skills along with industry-specific instruction. Research shows this strategy connects classroom learning to the demands of the workplace. Professional development for youth workers is a priority. Too often, the adults who are responsible for coaching students do not receive the professional development needed to truly prepare young people for the future of work. Employ innovative strategies like our Opportunity Youth Fund to address barriers, including physical and mental health, housing stability, transportation and childcare assistance, and food insecurity. You cannot learn or grow when your basic needs are not met. During the pandemic, our Youth Opportunity Fund helped nearly 1,000 young people stay connected to their programs. We intentionally simplified the process to ensure emergency funds were received in a way that best fit young people. Invest more in follow-up services and early work experiences, especially summer jobs. Adequate funding for follow-up sustains employment for young people. WIOA investments have declined since 2014. Current funding levels will not be adequate to keep pace with the rapidly changing world of work. Summer jobs need specific attention. While WIOA allows for summer youth employment, it is not enough. Since 1998, there has been no direct federal support for summer jobs other than the ARRA funding in 2009 and the Summer Jobs Plus initiative in 2016. Summer comes every year and so should the support. We applaud Congressman Scott's Opening Doors for Youth Act that would have authorized support for summer jobs, which has numerous benefits for young people, employers, and the local community. Philadelphia has invested more than $7 million annually for summer and year-round jobs. Even during the pandemic, PYN with our network of local policymakers provided more than 6,100 young people with summer jobs. Imagine what we could do with consistent funding. Everywhere, youth workers are helping young people to succeed. Effective data collection, payment systems, our career development framework, and virtual intern toolkit have been replicated in other cities. Thank you to the subcommittee members for your interest and bipartisan leadership in this work. Together, we can create high quality opportunities that young people need and more importantly, deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Fulmore Townsend. And we will now hear from Mr. Showalter. Ms. Showalter.
Good morning. I'm going to begin with the voices of young adults and a practitioner connected to programs authorized by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Being part of this program really changed how I saw myself. Just having support from other people made me feel more important and more worthy of success. Bethany. Staff give us opportunities for jobs. They tell us who's hiring. They talk directly with employers at real jobs. This is just a stepping stone, really. Memoria. During the pandemic, we strived to keep engaged with the youth who were able to participate. We were very fortunate to identify a few tribes able to work with youth and provide safe work sites, allowing the youth to gain basic skills and work experience. Christina. As members consider updating this legislation, now is a good time to consider the job prospects of today's young people. Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of the subcommittee, I'm so grateful to be here with you today. My name is Thomas Showalter. As the chairwoman said, I'm a senior advisor at the National Youth Employment Coalition. I'm also a senior fellow at the American Youth Policy Forum and a consultant. In the past, I served Chairman Edward M. Kennedy and Tom Harkin on the staff of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. I'm from Stillwater, Oklahoma, where I benefited from a wide array of jobs in my teenage years, scooping ice cream, walking dogs, plating seeds in a botany laboratory, plus numerous work-study jobs and externships while I was in college. These are the kinds of early work experiences that all young people need and that we can work together to make possible. As a nation, we desperately need a new vision for the transition to adulthood. In the years following World War II, public policies mapped such a vision. Radical disparities largely based on race were always present, but these policies defined a path into the middle class and beyond for millions, including my parents, who grew up in those post-war years. Most Americans are millennials like yours truly, Generation Z or younger. We face a long-term decrease in good jobs, a scarcity of career pathways for people without bachelor's degrees, and a youth labor market that no longer bounces back from recessions. In short, we need more good jobs and more pathways to good jobs, and we need them now. Today, as many as 1 in 3 16 to 24-year-olds are disconnected from education or employment. That's 10 million people. I appreciate the ranking member for alluding to how low labor force participation rates are now. These opportunity youth, as they're often called, are seeking opportunities and offer an opportunity to our nation. Many have already been touched by schools, the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, or behavioral health programs, but they need a little more help getting connected to education or employment. These are the young people targeted by Wioa programming. Research tells us that opportunity youth want to work, wish to attain higher education, and take responsibility for their future achievement. Even before the pandemic, there were huge gaps in who becomes disconnected by race, by geography, by socioeconomic status. The good news is that it's possible to prevent and repair youth disconnection in the United States because some places are doing it. Wioa reauthorization can begin to articulate a new vision for the transition to adulthood. From decades of research and practice, we know what strategies are effective for connecting all kinds of young people to school and work. Shakima alluded to many of these. In my written testimony, I propose an alternative way to think about the Wioa youth, in-school youth, out-of-school youth distinction, and I agree with the chairwoman, we need better pay and education for youth workers across the system. In a knowledge economy, social capital, access to mentors, executive skills, and an entrepreneurial mindset are critical for upward mobility. But programs funded by Wioa and other federal programs do not prioritize these activities. The law can also do more to drive equity by race, by gender, by ability, and to ensure that lawmakers target resources to those who most need services. We can do this. We've done this before. We can do it again. I will close with some words from Emmanuel. I call Youth Build my stepping stool, the biggest step I've ever taken in a positive direction. Youth Build helped me realize that my neighborhood, my community, is more than just where I live. My community is the world. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Showalter. Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Littner.
Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, and distinguished members of the Higher Education and Workforce Investment Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Deb Littner, and I am the HR manager at Pre-Corps located in North Carolina. I have served as the executive board members with both NC local and state workforce boards. I am also a part of the National Skills Coalition and Business Leaders United Manufacturing Industry Recovery Panel. Companies like Pre-Corps are actively engaging in efforts to build a skilled pipeline of young workers in our industry. I am urging Congress to support industry or sector partnerships that bring together education and industry partners to support on-the-job learning and incumbent worker training that helps us upskill existing workers and create entry-level positions for the next generation workers, and to support costs associated with transportation and childcare that too often serve as barrier to young people's success. Today, the workforce landscape has changed, and we've lost a year of developing the next generation workers. Workers that we furloughed were forced to find jobs in other industries or manufacturing subsectors, or have left the area. Partnerships that were the foundation of our hiring pipeline, those with workforce boards, high schools, community organizations, are not producing the number of candidates we are used to. We invest in workforce partnerships for two key reasons. First, public investments in the infrastructure that bring together small and mid-sized companies enable us to scale our impact. No single company can succeed alone, but the infrastructure of these partnerships make it possible. Many workers will need short-term training at the local community college to get back up to speed on skills necessary to be successful on the job. But Pre-Corps alone does not hire enough workers for the community college to run a dedicated program for our needs. We rely on organizations within these partnerships, including the local workforce board, Triad Goodwill, and the community college to identify potential applicants and help us hire young people who will be our workforce of the future. At Pre-Corps, consistently the most challenging aspect of hiring new workers, especially young workers, is their access to reliable transportation. Our plant is off any public transportation routes. We have young adults who do not have reliable transportation and must rely on others to get to and from work. For example, I hired a great candidate as a welder. Within the first week, he started having attendance problems. In speaking with him, he revealed that a family member promised to get him to and from work, decided all of a sudden to stop providing the ride. So we as a company, we decided to book and pay for a hotel room close to within walking distance so that he could get at least 2 paychecks and purchase a vehicle. I applaud the committee's bipartisan efforts to modernize the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and for taking time to identify the diverse strategies necessary to ensure our public workforce system serves both businesses like Pre-Corps and youth, people of color, and people without a high school diploma who have been the hardest hit by the current crisis. Job training will not solve our current crisis, but is part of the solution and critical to ensuring an inclusive economic recovery. First, ensuring public support for partnerships that bring together small and mid-sized companies like Pre-Corps and our partners in the Manufacturing Council and Community and Technical College and the public workforce system would make a huge impact in our community. Wioa currently supports these industry and sector partnerships, but provides no dedicated resources to empower states and local areas to invest in this strategy. For Pre-Corps, dedicated resources to support industry partnerships through Wioa Reauthorization, National Apprenticeship Act Reauthorization, and any response or recovery to the current crisis is critical to our ability to support the infrastructure we already have established. These partnerships should bring together employers as well as community organizations that have historically served youth, in particular opportunity youth who are not connected to school or employment. We are making the investment in our workers and can best leverage and scale investments like ours when matched with robust public investment. These investments would also support costs of providing incumbent worker training, of helping our workers develop digital skills, and of scaling on-the-job training opportunities for young people. Finally, to effectively reach the most robust and diverse pipeline of young people in our communities, Pre-Corps needs Congress to support investments in transportation and support services as part of WIO reauthorization. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Littner. And now we'll hear from Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, and all the members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. My name is Byron Garrett, and I serve as President and CEO of the National Job Corps Association. As a long life education advocate, including prior stints as a former school principal, education commissioner for the city of Phoenix, CEO of the National Parent Teacher Association, and co-convener of the Helping America's Youth Initiative led by former First Lady Laura Bush, it is a distinct honor to appear before this subcommittee and contribute to conversations that will impact the lives of millions of our nation's youth. I joined the Job Corps community in the summer of 2019, motivated by the program's mission to offer opportunity to our nation's most marginalized youth. A little more than 6 months into my tenure, the COVID-19 pandemic made clear the importance of that mission. Millions of Americans lost jobs, faced eviction, and turned to food banks to fend off hunger. Congress created the Job Corps program specifically to serve these students who are most impacted and affected, the 1 in 3 who are disconnected in the ages of 16 to 24 who lack ample education and employment opportunities. At over 120 campuses, including 1 in every state, Job Corps has the capacity to support tens of thousands of young Americans. Job Corps provides opportunities to earn a diploma or equivalency, career preparation for over 100 high-demand professions, earn industry-recognized credentials, participate in pre-apprenticeships and work-based learning, and the opportunity to dually enroll in college. We do a lot. Some programs, such as the Benjamin L. Hooks campus in Memphis, Tennessee, that Secretary Walsh and Second Gentleman Imhoff visited last week, Job Corps even offers child care and Head Start programs. And we have seen the proof in Job Corps. From homelessness to Harvard, from a child of an incarcerated father and high school dropout to celebrated tech entrepreneur and investor on Shark Tank, from dropout to 2-time heavyweight champion of the world, and from the homeless child of farm working immigrants to become the chief judge on the Idaho State Court of Appeals. These stories share the beginnings as millions of disadvantaged youth whose futures can be brighter because of Job Corps. While most of our students do not go to Harvard or become heavyweight champion of the world, by and large, our students achieve incredible outcomes under the guidance of our dedicated educators and staff. The average Job Corps enrollee enters the program reading below the 8th grade level, but advances 2.5 grade levels after less than a year in the program. In the last complete year before COVID, 82% of our enrollees earned an industry-recognized credential, with more than 85% of graduates transitioning into employment, post-secondary education, or enlisting in the military. We are proud of the success of our students and what they achieve in Job Corps and their lives after the program. But there are also opportunities, some highlighted by the COVID pandemic, to better orient our program to meet the needs of marginalized youth and the employers who need skilled workers to grow the American economy and our communities. In recent years, Job Corps has consistently had empty beds and classroom seats across the country, while homeless shelters were full and millions of young Americans were out of work and out of school. Each year, we expel thousands of students for behaviors such as marijuana use that can instead be addressed by our staff and enable those students to grow and become productive members of society. Our staff are frontline essential workers who house, feed, educate, and care for young people during this pandemic who had nowhere else to go. We've seen their wages fail to keep pace with local school districts and even decrease in some cases, making it impossible to retain our best staff. I would offer the following 4 recommendations and priorities for Job Corps reauthorization to help more socially economic disadvantaged young Americans. 1, reduce barriers to enrollment so that we can ease the documentation process for entry. 2, allow a system of positive behavioral interventions and supports and a progressive disciplinary system to maintain campus safety while enabling more students to become responsible, employable citizens. 3, enable flexibility to take a student and employer-centered approach to Job Corps campus operations. And 4, ensure that Job Corps teachers and staff are compensated appropriately. The COVID-19 pandemic has made clear the extraordinary need for Job Corps. Since the start of the pandemic, about 20,000 struggling young Americans have applied to enroll, and the stories that we see on public forums like Reddit are absolutely heartbreaking. They are pleading for our support. Many are homeless, hungry, or concerned about how to support their children, and Job Corps offers hope in a desert of desperation. And we consider this an investment in the future. Any young person should be able to walk through the door of a one-stop center or engage in a homeless support services and be immediately referred to a Job Corps admissions counselor. We look forward to engaging in this robust discussion. And as I tell people all the time, if the mind can conceive it and the heart can believe it, then the hands can achieve it, because it all begins in the mind.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garrett. And I just want to say that in my respective community, the president of the NAACP is a product of Job Corps. And she actually said to me that if it were not for Job Corps, she would either be dead or she would be in prison, because she was a rebellious teenager, an immigrant from Haiti, and rebelled against the grandparents that were raising her, and Job Corps saved her life. Thank you so much. Under Committee Rule 9.8, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I will be recognizing subcommittee members in seniority order. Again, to ensure that the members' 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time, and the timer will show a blinking light when time has expired. Please be attentive to the time. Wrap up when your time is over and remute your microphone. And as chair of the committee, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Garrett, how have the 2016 updates to the Job Corps zero tolerance policy impacted student retention in Job Corps, and what reforms would you recommend to this policy to help students stay connected to the Job Corps program?
Thank you for that question, Chairwoman Wilson, and thank you for that example. We hear stories of students just like your NAACP president who recognize the value of having benefited from the program. We see that 1 in 4 Job Corps students are mandatorily expelled. This accounts for the majority of students who don't graduate. Many of those expulsions are for substance use or minor behavioral infractions. I was visiting the Milwaukee Center 2 years ago, and when I was there on the ground visiting the center, A student broke a glass because they threw a ball, they broke a window, and that was considered a major infraction, even though those of us there saw what happened. Had we not engaged at that point in time, the way the policy is designed, that student could have been immediately expelled. And so the zero tolerance policy, we ask that in legislation that we have greater flexibility. We understand the need for greater accountability, but we need greater flexibility. One final example is that each year over 6,000 students enroll test positive for marijuana use, and as a result drop out or they are expelled in less than a month and a half. But we also find that when students go through our full program, we're able to support them in getting the right behavioral supports they need to change their behavior and therefore getting their academic needs met as well as their employability. And so we recognize that there are major changes that need to shift within the way the current ZT policy or zero tolerance policy is structured.
Okay, it is my understanding that as a result of COVID-19, Job Corps now only has about 15,000 students enrolled when they have the capacity of 60,000. What challenges does Job Corps face in enrolling more students, and what are some ways that we could address the eligibility challenges Job Corps faces as a Congress?
Thanks for that question as well. And you're correct, our capacity is right around 60,000. And actually in 2012, it was lowered due to budgetary concerns, about 18%. And even if we were at full capacity because of that lowering, there would still be additional space on many centers across the country. And during the pandemic, there was a slow shift to move to virtual and distance learning. Distribution of laptops took greater time than anticipated because of the federal process that the Department of Labor had to officially procure those programs versus the actual youth service provider being able to do that on site. And we believe we could have expedited getting more students engaged and connected from a distance perspective. I think the second piece, as you think about this particular work and how we look where students need to be going forward, we have a different type of responsibility in this day and age. When we look at our population and we know who they are, oftentimes, Chairwoman Wilson, it is more difficult for a Job Corps student or a student wanting to be in Job Corps to apply for this program because of the burden of paperwork than it is to apply for college. And we know that this process must be streamlined and become much more efficient so that a student can walk in one day, be referred the next, and not have to wait weeks or months to officially enter the program. So we strongly recommend really streamlining the application and admissions process to make it more readily available. The last thing I would say is that many of our students, as you know, coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, the health information, finance information, being homeless or transient, they don't even have the documentation required. And we know that Congress has already designated opportunity zones, which tells us their economic condition. So if a student came from that environment or were homeless, they should automatically be eligible without having this additional hurdle to prove or overcome that they belong in the program.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Showalter, I'm concerned about youth who have become disconnected during the pandemic. How can we ensure that this population does not fall between the cracks?
Chairwoman, I really appreciate that question. In our field, we've been doing a lot to try to keep track of the adaptations and innovations that have been happening during the pandemic. My organization, the National Youth Employment Coalition, as well as the Aspen Institute Opportunity Youth Forum, have done some great jobs in documenting some of the adaptations that programs have made. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of young people that the disconnection rate has increased markedly. And at this point, Wioa funded programs only serve, a little over 200,000 young people each year out of, as several of us have alluded to, the 10 million that are out there. And as I think you're alluding to, the number of young people who school districts may not even have counted as dropouts yet. So programs are doing everything they can to find young people. And for most programs, they have a waiting line of young people who want to get into the program.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to recognize Ranking Member Dr. Fox for her question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate this, and I thank our witnesses for being with us. Mr. Garrett, you have painted a very, very rosy picture of Job Corps, but reports like these paint a very different picture of Job Corps and show it as being almost totally dysfunctional. We have over 30 different government reports and audits raising concerns over the safety and security of Job Corps participants. While the program's meant to be an outlet to help disadvantaged youth gain the skills necessary to achieve a good education, the past failures of the program do a disservice to students, staff, and hardworking taxpayers who fund these programs. And I am very concerned about your saying you're at 25% capacity right now. And I'm wondering how much of that money is going to be recovered for the hardworking taxpayers who continue to work during COVID and receive nothing from the money they're giving to Job Corps. A 2017 report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office found that Job Corps centers reported 61 deaths of students on Job Corps campuses, another 204 that occurred off-site, a quarter of which were reported as homicides. In 2018, GAO reported there had been 13,673 incidences involving students in just 1 year, in which over 2,500 were reported cases of assault. That same year, the Department of Labor Office of the Inspector General reported that of randomly sampled participants with a documented employment history, over 50% were placed in jobs similar to those they held prior to their participation in the program, and a number even returned to the same employer. I'd also like to submit for the record these reports, along with a recent article in Washington Monthly outlining many of these same concerns. Madam Chair, while I understand there are Job Corps students who find some benefits through the program, there's clearly room for substantial improvement. As we begin discussions about a reauthorization of Wioa and the Job Corps program, how can we increase accountability for center contractors and ensure that performance improves going forward to better serve students, and we don't rely just on anecdotal stories from you?
Thank you, Dr. Fox, for that question and the additional commentary. And I am well acquainted, as we all are now, with both the OIG and the GAO reports. What I would tell you is that given the student population we serve, what you just identified, most of those deaths on centers were actually medical. Almost all homicides and suicides were off center. Our students, what we know, given their background, the situation and circumstances that they come from, they are safer in our care and on campus than they are in their respective homes, even right now in the middle of the pandemic. We know for a fact, as we've talked with students, as we've talked with their families, the environments that they come from, many of them are literally homeless at this particular point in time, just trying to get back into a center. And so while there is room for improvement, and there always will be, as we see on college campuses that have incidents that are similar and also quite alarming, we know for a fact that the opportunities that we're providing young people to get back to where it is they need to be, we know for a fact that the program is highly effective and highly successful. As it relates to what we can do with the youth service providers in shifting their approach and their greater accountability, we too share your concern in terms of accountability and flexibility. We believe our members and the youth service providers need a greater flexibility for how they operate their program, while at the same time, the federal department, the Department of Labor, continues to offer the level of accountability that's necessary. So this dual idea of flexibility, but also greater accountability is necessary. The last thing I would say is this: as we think about young people in this particular day and age and society as it has adjusted and it has changed, and the growing needs and needs of our young folks, the healthcare issues they have, the mental health issues that go unaddressed, the Job Corps program meets the total needs of those young people. And again, while there's room for improvement, we know for a fact that they're better off in this particular program, as we see from the successes, than if they were not.
Well, I think we keep trying to put Band-Aids on programs. And until we look at what is causing these young people to be in the situations they're in, then I think we are doing nothing to improve our culture. And Mr. Showalter, we've run out of time, but I will submit a question to you for response relative to comments that you made in your testimony. This is a deeply troubling situation that we have here with Job Corps, and it's unacceptable to the taxpayers as well as to the people who are participating in the programs and the expectations that we have for it. With that, Madam Chairman, I apologize for going over and I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. And the last statement you made, you said that we needed to look at what happens and causes children to be eligible for Job Corps. And you and I started on a quest like this my first year on the committee. So I'm saying to you in the public arena that we're going to be having conversations, Dr. Fox, about what you said. And now we're on the same path, and I appreciate your comments. And now we're going to have questions from Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate a hearing on this very important topic for our youth. Ms. Fillmore Townsend, from your experience at the Philadelphia Youth Network, how have you seen work-based learning programs such as internships, pre-apprenticeships, or youth apprenticeship programs support student success?
Thank you so much for that question. There are several ways in which we've seen internships, pre-apprenticeship, and youth work experience programs support student success. First and foremost, it expands the world of thinking for young people. And so they are able to make real world connections to what they're learning in the classroom. Secondly, it exposes them to a greater social capital. They are actually connect with adults who support their goals. Our data shows that 90%, almost 90% of the young people who participate in our summer jobs program respond that they feel more prepared for school and more prepared for a future career after participating in our program. Additionally, young people earn real dollars when they work in the summer. And guess what they do with that money? They reinvest it right back into the community. They use that money to support their basic needs and prepare to return back to school. And so we've seen student success be bolstered by employment experiences.
So Ms. Fillmore Townsend, just to unpack that word social capital, it's been used several times by witnesses. It simply just means these young people make connections to contacts, adult contacts or other contacts that will connect them to other opportunities. Is that the way we think of social capital?
I think about it a little bit more deeply than that. So not just contacts, but understanding the behaviors and the expectations of the workplace, understanding how relationships can be maximized to advance your goals, becoming more comfortable with asking questions and seeking help, which are critical to any person's success. None of us here today got to where we are alone, and our young people need an army, a village of adults to help them achieve their goals as well. So it's more than contacts, it's about relationships and true engagement.
So relationships that will often persist and become a part of that young person. Tell me, why is it so important that these opportunities be paid?
It is critical that the opportunities be compensated. Young people have to learn the value of their talents. And it's important because, again, as I shared, young people invest those dollars back into the community. And so we are teaching them by compensation that not only is their talent valued, but what to expect from the workplace and how to use that money to change community.
Well, thank you. From your experience as the president and CEO of Philadelphia Youth Network, as well as your role on the board of the Community College of Philadelphia, I was a community college trustee for 22 years before I became a member of Congress. What insights or recommendations could you provide on strengthening alignment between the workforce system and the K-12 education system, as well as community colleges?
Sure. I am proud to be a trustee at the Community College of Philadelphia, where Dr. Guy Generals is the president. And there are a few strategies that we are employing locally that I think are worth mentioning. The first is that we ensure support through our Cato scholarships so that young people can have early exposure to the academic content for college. We have dual enrollment programs, which are common across the country, and I urge you to consider funding that adequately so that young people are able to prepare for college while they're still in high school, and not just prepare, but to acquire credits during that time. We also see opportunities for alignment with teachers and college professors around math curriculum, the literature skills, as well as exposing both K-12 and college professors to the industry needs. And so there is great opportunity to close the gaps between those systems by creating more early college programs like our middle college, which this year we graduated our first class of 90 students who will not just graduate with the high school diploma, but will also have an associate's degree. That type of innovation can be commonplace in America if we choose to invest in it.
Thank you so much for that answer. Madam Chair, I'm such a big fan of dual enrollment and middle colleges, and I know that my colleague Suzanne Bonamici and the ranking member of the committee, the full committee, I hope that we are able to get some resources to have members go and visit these programs. And Philadelphia is so nearby. I hope we can do that. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chicano. And that whole dual enrollment is such a wonderful phenomenon that we're experiencing all over the nation. And now we will hear from our ranking member, Dr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me just echo Representative Takano's statement. I think dual enrollment has been a game changer for young adults, that they can actually pursue two different lines of education in a much more efficient and productive manner. So I agree with him completely. Let me just turn my question to Ms. Littner at first. Ms. Littner, your story is one that I hear over and over again from employers in my district and from across the nation, that there is a disconnect between the need to get individuals back to work and the skills that businesses like yours are looking for in the future employees. So it's one thing to give our youth a skill, but it's quite another thing that it actually is a skill that local employers need. But it seems far too often that businesses are either not aware of the services that are provided by the workforce system, or that the system itself doesn't fit their particular needs. So tell me, what benefits has your company seen in partnering with the workforce system to engage young people and provide them with the experience to work?
That's a great question. Pre-COVID, we had successful partnerships with the workforce boards, Triad Goodwill, and a few others. But I think ultimately, I'm seeing more challenges post-COVID, meaning that I don't think that the workforce boards and some of the partnerships out there, they're struggling just as well as we're struggling. And I don't think they have a good understanding of what a company like mine needs. And I think that it might be that they're not tasked or they're not federally funded or what have you. But at the same respect, when you talk about the successes on the job training, Precorp is one of 6 founding companies for the Guilford Apprenticeship program for high school students. While it's very successful today for me at Precorp, we struggled because a lot of the high school students did not have transportation to come to my side of the county. So that was a problem. So we ended up just doing our own incumbent workforce upskilling training and just taking it on ourselves. And I think that is where I sit today, unfortunately. I have a lot of questions. Where might I need to go? I've reached out to my business partners and they're struggling. So while I don't know if I'm actually answering your question about success, I know it's out there and I'm actually restarting everything, because you got to remember, we downsized, we furloughed last year, and now we're just trying to build back better again. And so it's like I've got to restart all of my programs again with my community partners.
Right. Well, thank you, Ms. Littner. I do think that the American businesses are struggling now because of the effect of COVID, and even more so now because there seems to be a large propensity of folks that are needed in the workforce who are staying home. An entirely different thing that we're dealing with, and something that I think with training will take a long time to pick back up. In my time remaining, I'm going to ask Ms. Townsend just a question. I appreciate you sharing your experience that your organization does to support youth in and around Philadelphia. And I hear the constant disconnect between employers and individuals looking for work due to the vast and growing skills gap, and obviously which has been exacerbated by COVID. How have you developed relationships with the employers in your area? And how do you and what do you think those businesses value when bringing young people on board through your program?
Thank you so much, Congressman Murphy. With our employers, we learn quite a bit. First, employers value ease and they value options. So when you're creating an employer engagement system, you have to have a tiered and customized approach to building relationships, understanding their talent needs, ensuring that training is well connected to those talent needs, giving them space and voice in the curriculum development, and building strong partnerships between the youth serving agencies and the organizations. For us, our employers, it's more than just being civically responsible. It is about building the next generation of talent. And so we work together to create solutions like our career development framework, which is endorsed by our employers, which translate the employer expectations to basic skills that anyone can understand, a young person, a family member, educator, so that we're all on the same page working together. When employers told us they needed help with virtual internships, we responded. We created a virtual internship toolkit. We provide coaching for their staff so that they can be effective supervisors with young people. We will stop at nothing in order to ensure our employers are successful, because we know that helping them be successful is the gateway to ensuring young people are employed.
Great. Thank you so much. I think my time is up. Thank you very much for your response. Madam Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murphy. We'll now hear from Representative Jalapal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this very important hearing. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is a powerful tool to equip working people with the education and training services that they need for today's labor market. As we reapproach reauthorization, recovering from the pandemic, we have to address unique barriers to employment that are faced by young people of color in this country. That means grappling with the reality of systemic racism in today's labor market and prioritizing support for jobs that pay people a living wage. In my home state of Washington, lawmakers and civil society organizations have long highlighted the specific issues facing young people that are disconnected from education and the workforce. Research shows that young people of color are less likely to be employed between the ages of 16 and 29, and that these early impediments leave Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students worse off when it comes to long-term career prospects and economic security. Despite the fact that racial discrimination claims are among the most commonly filed claims with the EEOC, they have the lowest rates of success, with only 15% of cases resulting in some form of relief in 2019. Ms. Townsend, how can this subcommittee use Wioa reauthorization to address barriers to employment for young people of color, such as employment discrimination?
Thank you so much for that question. I alluded to some of the areas that I think are really critical. The first is we have to make sure that young people of color are connected to training that is connected to a sustainable wage. So we have to focus on growing industries. We have to be very cognizant of STEM related fields, and we have to support any gaps in education and academic attainment that will allow them to be successful. But it's not just on the part of programs and young people. We have to work with our employers to address hiring standards, to uncover bias, and to support them in thinking through what is actually needed for the position and how young people can demonstrate competence for those positions. Succinctly said, there's a bar on the hiring side that every employee must clear, and we have to put the supports in place so that our young people who have been traditionally disadvantaged are able to clear that bar.
Thank you, very helpful. And as we think about the youth opportunity funds and the importance of those funds, are there specific features of the programs that we should be focused on improving to address the unique needs of youth that have left the traditional classroom?
Certainly, I think focusing on outcomes and being very specific, because what works for some will not work for all. And we have to employ flexibility when we think about how we measure success. Progress is equally as important as the ultimate goals. And we often measure the success of a program only by the end game. And there's a lot of work in between the outcome, and that should be valued as well. I think additionally, rethinking that 75% set aside, it really forces restrictions. And as Chairwoman Wilson said earlier, unintended consequences. Intervention, prevention is cheaper. So we should be prudent with the economic resources that we have and allow communities the ability to decide which strategy is going to be most effective. They're closer to the problem. They have the better solutions.
And last question for you. What difference does it make for the long-term earnings potential of young people of color when they are matched with jobs that pay a living wage?
Significant difference. And so what we have seen from the work that we've done and surveying our alumni and collecting qualitative research as well as quantitative research is that what young people, the skills that they acquire, they continue to apply. They're more likely to keep their jobs. They're more likely to earn not just a self-sustaining wage. They have better connections with their family. They tend to be more civically engaged. And so in short, what we're building is more civic-minded, prepared young people when they engage in WIOA programming and succeed. It's important for us to reinforce the things that work so that young people have a greater opportunity to connect to the workforce, but more importantly, to live their very best life.
It's a beautiful way to end. I think if we want to truly serve young people, we've got to equip them with the skills and the resources that they need to flourish over the course of their lives. And that's everything from the counseling, the intervention that you talked about, the counseling, the case management services, and the unique employment barriers that young people of color face. So I look forward to working with all of my colleagues to meet the needs of all young people, including young people of color, as we work to reauthorize Wioa this year. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to remind everyone that pursuant to the Office of the Attending Physician and Committee Rule 2, everyone, every single person in the committee room, whether on camera or not, is required to wear a mask pursuant to the instructions distributed by the Office of the Attending Physician. If it is not your turn to speak, please wear your mask for the health and safety of everyone else in the room, including yourselves. Thank you. If you're in the committee room, please put on a mask so that we can continue the meeting. I now recognize Representative Grothman.
Okay, you can all hear me? Thank you. My first comment is just really a comment for Mr. Showalter. He said something I was a little bit disturbed about. Those without bachelor's degrees face a scarcity of career pathways for young people without such credentials. At least in my district, and I think nationwide, there's a plethora of people with bachelor's degrees who wind up deeply in debt and don't have any skills that make them any more employable. Meanwhile, whether you talk to the medical community, the manufacturing community, the construction community, there are so many great jobs out there that don't require a 4-year bachelor degree. I'm a little bit concerned because you apparently are in the area of employment. This advice, the bachelor's degree, has allowed so many people to wind up so in debt. And frequently they find themselves when they go back and get a skill when they're 28 or 29 years old. I think some of this is driven by snobbery of people who do have a college degree and think somehow their job makes them better than people without a college degree. But I encourage you to go to some construction sites, go to some medical facilities, go to some manufacturers, and you will find great jobs and, quite frankly, a lot more employment security than people who have some vague degree in social work or something. So now I want to switch over to Mr. Garrett. Mr. Garrett, I had the privilege of visiting one of the Milwaukee Job Corps centers outside my district with former Secretary of Labor Eugene Scalia prior to the pandemic. It was very illuminating. But in addition to technical skills, what can we do to better prepare young workers to meet employers' expectations and to give employers confidence that these youth will be responsible workers?
Thank you, Congressman. First and foremost, thank you certainly for visiting the center with Secretary Scalia. We always try to tell folks when you get to visit and engage with students and also talk with staff, oftentimes the perspective changes when you hear the real life stories of how the program benefits young people. But specifically to your question, there are a number of things that we currently do and additional things that need to be done. So the whole notion as we talk about having positive behavioral interventions and supports in helping young people outside of their technical skill for their trade gain the actual soft skills, as some people refer to them in business, that are still necessary. What does it mean to be responsible, to show up on time, to dress and be prepared, to have conversation and be able to engage and follow and see things through? Many young people, as you know, especially coming from the Milwaukee area or other areas across the country, oftentimes they lack that type of structure and discipline and really rely upon the program to allow them to be in a structured, safe environment. The other piece specific to employers is they value the soft skills piece in addition to the trades and certifications, because it creates a more well-rounded employee that comes to work and they understand that they're capable. That's why we support work-based learning opportunities to really show and not just tell employers that students are capable.
Okay, I have a general question for you. This is kind of a follow-up on what Representative Fox said. We talk about priority populations and people who come to Job Corps without structure and discipline in their lives. What type of background causes somebody to grow up without structure and discipline in their life?
Well, sir, I would say there are a host of factors that come to that. I wouldn't say that there is some broad stereotypical generalization that I would make. Oftentimes, economic conditions certainly exacerbate challenges. If you come from an impoverished background, or if you're a 16 or 17-year-old young person who is literally homeless and transient, you lack the structure because you're trying to figure out, how do I just simply navigate day-to-day living, literally hand to mouth every single day?
I guess I'm trying to get at what type of family background would lead someone to be homeless or lead someone to have any structure in their home? What type of family background?
Well, there are a variety of family backgrounds. I would say, as one of the members just alluded to, systemic racism has created significant issues geographically, depending upon where you live. But what we see is that students in our programs hail from rural communities, urban communities, suburban communities, come from a zero-parent household because they've lost family members. We see students who come from a dual-parent household. We even see students that come from an educated household. So folks want to say that you can cast this wide net and then minimize it to say this is the only factor that contributed to this particular student's behavior or for them to become so marginalized. And there are a number of factors depending upon where you are geographically in the country. I would say, as the research shows, poverty is usually the leading indicator because you don't have access to the same level of supports and resources, whether that's mental health issues, whether it's education opportunities. So there are a number of contributing factors that really allow someone to end up in a position that they really need the benefit of Job Corps. The last thing I would tell you is that also our traditional educational system, the way it is designed and structured, does not meet the needs of every single young person. And some people need an opportunity that they can just focus. I want to focus on my academic career so I can complete that. Or some say, I just really need to focus on getting a great trade or a great certification so I can earn a higher wage. And they want to be in a program that is really going to position them to do that. And if they're on a residential center, they don't need the additional distractions and noise of the environment that could allow them to be grouped with someone else where they can really focus on their trajectory and their dedicated success. And so there are a number of factors that contribute to how a young person ends up at a Job Corps center.
Either for you or anyone else, if I have a couple seconds, are we doing things to make sure that people, when they have children themselves, have a more structured environment for their children. Does anybody deal with that?
You're over time.
I'm over time. Well, okay, that's okay. We let you off the hook. Thank you.
We will now go to Ms. Manning, Representative Manning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question I will direct to my fellow North Carolinian, Ms. Linder. In your testimony, you discussed the challenges that youth, especially low-income youth, face in accessing employment opportunities. And we've talked about that a little bit, but I was struck by your example of how youth couldn't access employment opportunities if they didn't have access to transportation. And I appreciate your recommendation that we expand access to supportive services for youth. What additional supports do you see youth needing to come prepared for the employment opportunities that your company provides?
You know, there's probably a lot of barriers that I probably can't even begin to touch on. But for me personally, you know, in my organization, besides transportation, childcare, I'd love to do youth apprentice programs, but, you know, the dedicated staff that they require at my organization, you know, is burdensome to a certain extent. You know, but at the same respect, I think soft skills, tech skills, access to technology, you know, as an employer whose the application process is done online, that's huge. I know one thing that, you know, they may have a smartphone, they may be able to do everything, but they may not have the computer. I know that's where I do get potential candidates. I send them to Triad Goodwill. I send them to a lot of my workforce partners that I know have the access or give them the training. But again, they've got to be able to get there. Most recently, due to COVID, Triad Goodwill that had a career center right by our office or our location had to downsize, and now it's 20 miles away. So I think you've got to get a buy-in with employers. I think you've got to engage, you know, we've got to kind of just redo it because it's different post-COVID, if that makes any sense. A lot of things pre-COVID, you know, were working well, but this has just changed. I don't know where everybody has gone from a candidate perspective.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett, one of the criticisms of Job Corps is that there's a wide variation in performance of programs across the country, with some programs providing life and career changing opportunities for individuals, with the performance of others indicating that some students just go back to similar jobs they've had before they started the program. What can be done to improve performance across all centers? And what are current barriers to improving performance?
Ms. Manning, thank you for that question. And I also wanted to share with you, I'm a fellow North Carolinian, hometown of Greensboro from Guilford, and graduate of formerly High Point College, now High Point University. Go Panthers.
I'm from Greensboro as well, so glad to have that connection.
And we look forward to having you visit the Cottrell Center if you have time. I think in relation to your question, as it relates to performance across the board and across the country, we favor the idea, and there are a number of challenges, right? So you have students who have to complete a certain amount of academic requirement, whether that's what they signed up for or whether they came to the program coupled with their career. And so we believe that we need to have a more personalized experience for each student regarding what their particular career outcomes are and the desires for them to be engaged in the program. And also on the youth service provider and those who actually operate the campuses across the country, we want to ensure that we have a performance-based contracting process so that we're ensuring that we're hiring the best staff that are available and that folks who are operating campuses are those who have the strongest track record for performance. And so we continue to work with the Department of Labor, who issues continuous guidance and great insight around how do we improve those performance metrics. But I will tell you at the end of the day, just like a K-12 system or higher education system, it really involves us more personalizing the experience for the student on what their needs and goals are to really direct them on the right pathway and not burden them with things that they don't find the necessary priority. If I dropped out of high school, The last thing I want to hear necessarily is that you're telling me I need to complete this 60-hour academic component when I'm really saying, look, I've got 2 kids. I may get ready to get married or not, and I'm 20 or 19. I need a skill and trade that will allow me to do better and perform better and make a higher wage than if I just went to apply it to a local employer without actually having a recognized industry level credential or certification.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. And the Cottrell Center is now on my list for my next district visit.
Outstanding. We'll see you there.
That's great. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Fulcher. Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just, I want to just acknowledge what Mr. Garrett said just a little bit ago. He acknowledged Sergio Gutierrez, who went through the Job Corps program. He was justice in the Idaho Court of Appeals. And so we're proud of him. And Mr. Garrett, thank you for that acknowledgement. Also, Job Corps is a major pathway to help young people connect in the labor workforce in my state, forestry management, wildfire management, other jobs. And so I'm going to leverage that to make my sales pitch. I'm a sponsor of the Forestry Education and Workforce Development Act, which is a $20 million discretionary grant program to provide degrees or certificates in forestry and forestry related fields. So I wanted to just leverage that talking point with my sales pitch on that bill. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Garrett. I do have a question for you. You talked about the need for Job Corps to be flexible enough to adapt to the skills offered for emerging industries. How and what can be done to engage the business community more? Can you speak to that, Mr. Garrett?
Yeah, and great question. Thank you for that. And I'll just highlight just for a moment, the Job Corps Civilian Conservation Centers. As we know, students through those programs, for example, have earned over $6 million in wages in recent years, fighting wildland fires and preserving federal lands. And we see those dollars going directly back in the community. And as we know, these aren't just opportunities to learn skills, but those earnings are crucial to graduates as they successfully make the transition from being housed and fed and transported by Job Corps. On each center, or on each campus, you'll find that there's usually a business community liaison position who is working hand in hand with the local business community, the local workforce investment board, to really determine how not only do they place students, but how do they identify opportunities, but also what are the emerging career opportunities or trades that are being projected so that we could then align our program and certifications to be able to produce graduates who could move seamlessly into that. And we see great partnerships like that across the country. We want to see more of those replicated and certainly enhanced because we know that the demand is great and that we have individuals who are willing to do that. I will say we've also been working with the Department of Labor on trying to figure out how we shorten the timeline for when a new trade is introduced that may be market specific, that's not nationwide. How can we accelerate the approval of that to really meet the local needs of the emerging, of the local workforce investment board in the particular emerging market?
Thank you for that, Mr. Garrett. And I'd like to also ask a question of Ms. Shekema Fulmer Townsend. And in your comments, you talked about how your partnerships with local workforce boards and employers have assisted you in preparing young people for future careers. How do you get the word out? How do you advertise what you do? How are those programs known? Promotional, if you could speak to that, please.
Sure. Thank you, Representative Fulcher. We do a couple of things to ensure that the program is well known in community. The first is that we partner with other nonprofit organizations that are housed in various communities throughout Philadelphia. We support those organizations in recruiting young people. We ensure that they have adequate data collection, and we make sure that they have all of the laws and regulations required for youth employment. And so our nonprofit partners are a critical component. We also partner with our local city government. And so we are part of a larger initiative. It's not just summer jobs, it's summer jobs connected to our Office of Children and Family Services. And we are a part of a nexus to surround families in need. Thirdly, we use social media very effectively in order to inform parents. We've created videos so that young people would understand what is needed for the world of work. We have a call center so that if families are struggling to get through the process, they can reach out to someone who can help navigate them. And we've also employed technology. We have a program locator so that if you're in a community, you can find the organizations that are providing those services for you. All of those things help us get the word out. And then we have 22 years of performance and a track record of outcomes. And the community knows us for delivering on our promises to young people.
Great, thank you. And thank you for those who provided information today. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Oh, thank you so much. And now, Mr. Bowman, the Vice Chair of our committee, of the entire Education and Labor Committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony. This hearing has been very informative and very powerful. Ms. Fillmore Townsend, can you speak to how you make connections and build relationships with the K-12 system, if at all? How are those relationships created, built, and strengthened so there could be a streamlined effect from the K-12 system into your program? Can you speak to that a bit?
Absolutely. We have a thriving relationship with our local K-12 system where Dr. William Height is the superintendent. So it starts at the top. First, we look at partnership on multiple levels. So not only am I in direct contact consistently with the superintendent, but my staff have multiple points of connection in the research office, in the high school planning office, and we work intentionally to design interventions and maximize local policy. An example of that, young people who are engaged in career and technical education programs are supported through our Work Ready Summer program, and we help to connect them to employers in the industries in which they're studying. So it makes the classroom learning more important to the young people, and it also gives employers a chance to advance curriculum. We also provide school year internships, and we could not do that if we did not have good partnerships with our K-12 system. We also, with our career development framework, educators were a huge part of developing a common framework so that we could all approach career preparation in the same way. And so they helped us build that framework. And in turn, they apply that framework to their approach to career readiness and thinking through what are the expectations of a high school graduate. We also monitor data together. So when the information indicates that there is a challenge, it is not one person's problem, it is our problem collectively. And we use data to inform and instruct rather than to criticize and convict. And that has made us all more willing to work together, to be vulnerable, and to plan for innovation.
That's amazing. I would love to connect with your office and learn more about that curriculum that you speak of, because it seems like a really necessary and powerful tool. Mr. Garrett, can you respond to the same question, just your relationship and connection to the K-12 system?
Yeah, thank you, sir. And, you know, we do great work in the South Bronx, just as an FY, and we look forward to you. I'm going to always extend the invitation to come to a center, given the number of students we serve, about 700 or so just in the last 2 years prior to COVID, as an FYI for you. As it relates to our connection to the K-12 system, that varies across the board from campus to campus. But in most cases, again, our business community liaison, the center directors, and many of the staff have robust partnerships with the school district. So where we find that a student is not making their way through the traditional K-12 system and they're looking for an opportunity, how can they be placed directly in our program? But we've got to, again, streamline the process because, again, as you can imagine, if you are a student who's at your wit's end in the K-12 system and you're looking for an immediate opportunity, you don't have months to capture that student's attention. The fact that they even expressed interest in the first place or they were referred by their guidance counselor or social worker or case management, depending upon their status, we need a more expeditious process to get them directly enrolled in days, not weeks or months. And so we partner with school districts, we partner with, again, local workforce investment boards and community partners to ensure that they have a full understanding that Job Corps is still relevant, the nature of the work that we do, the types of opportunities that are available for students, and really work with them on going from beginning to end, what is the process to get them in the door from their current situation to being on campus. Because we know when a student successfully completes the program, it doesn't just change the trajectory of their life, but it really changes the trajectory of the lives of all of those that they're connected to.
Congressman, could I also respond to that question?
Prior to coming to Congress, I worked in education for 20 years as a teacher, school counselor, and middle school principal. And what I've seen is a disconnect between what we're teaching and how we're teaching and what we expect of young people when it comes to post-secondary opportunities. And it just seems like the work that you all are doing and our focus on workforce development needs to be not just an intervention, but needs to be part of core curriculum within the K-12 system. I think we can be doing a lot more in that space than we are currently doing. And your testimony is really important, and I think we need to continue to think about what it looks like in our K-12 spaces. So thank you all for sharing that. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. I had an exact conversation with the committee staff yesterday on an issue that just as you referenced. There's a huge line of demarcation that should not be there between K-12 and post-secondary. It should be a smooth transition, and there are so many issues that we need to address to make sure that that transition is much smoother. And we have to educate our K-12 curriculum and superintendents and state legislators as to what they need to be teaching to make it smoother. So we'll get to that in our committee, and thank you again. And now we go to Ms. Miller, Representative Miller Meeks. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Dr. Murphy, and all the panelists presenting here today. My congressional district is very fortunate to have the Ottumwa Job Corps Center in my home community, which is one of the newest and highest performing centers in the country and enjoys a very productive relationship with nearby Indian Hills Community College. And as Dr. Murphy alluded to in his opening remarks, this relationship and partnership does not exist adjacent to or with every Job Corps center. This partnership allows my constituents and the students at a time when there is a study that has a plethora of trades available at Indian Hills, such as advanced manufacturing, while still benefiting from the wraparound support services and residential environment at the Job Corps campus. For Indian Hills, it allows them to send more remedial students to Job Corps who might not be ready for a community college environment and to get the needed education, training, and support services before they eventually matriculate back to college. Mr. Garrett, it is my understanding that these types of community college partnerships exist elsewhere and Job Corps, but may not be to the same degree as this one. How might we improve workforce innovation and the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act so that these types of partnerships are easier to build and to encourage more innovation at the local level?
Thanks for that, Congresswoman Miller Meeks. And you're exactly right. The Ottumwa Job Corps Center is a true beacon of hope, I think, for the entire country. The partnership between Ottumwa and the Indian Hills Community College represents the gold standard for the Job Corps Community College partnership across the country, and we are figuring out ways to really replicate that quickly. As some may know, our former board chair, Dr. Jim Lindenmeyer, was president of Indian Hills Community College, and he really sought to help replicate the model because he was able to forecast and say, this is what's going to be necessary, that we should be working in tandem and in partnership. And just to go a little further, for those that may not be familiar, the Job Corps Scholars Demonstration Program, which Indian Hills is currently participating in, it demonstrates that the model works best when there is this unique partnership between the Job Corps Center and Indian Hills. And a prime example is that it allows students to transfer not only from the Job Corps Center to Indian Hills, but it also allows for students from Indian Hills who have remedial issues or challenges to be referred to a job program where those students' career goals could also be met. And so the statute right now in the Department of Labor should really be structured in a way that it encourages these partnerships, but not separate grants in isolation. And we've seen over recent years that we've seen funding come out or opportunities come out that are separate and apart, and we all need to do a better job to make sure that they're better integrated. The last thing I would say is just this notion of credit transferability and credit for prior learning. College partnerships really give our students access to college credit, similar to a high school student that's dually enrolled. Student and Job Corps centers also have that unique opportunity. And then it lowers the barrier for college completion by improving that credit transferability and the credit for prior learning. So we look forward to figuring out how we continue to advance that partnership and showcase that for others to then also take advantage and follow your steed in the state of Iowa.
Well, thank you for that. And I have had the opportunity to visit the center. And so I would encourage others to do the same thing. And with that, one of the policies, and I think you discussed this, Mr. Garrett, in your remarks, is the impact of the Job Corps' zero tolerance drug policy. And you recommended moving to a more positive behavioral intervention model. And I understand that there may be some nuances, that are not allowed in a zero tolerance model. But I also believe that we cannot lose track of accountability and that there must be consequences for poor decisions. How do you recommend we strike a balance so that we can truly improve outcomes for these young individuals?
Make no mistake about it, and you're exactly right. Students will still be expelled who don't rise to the occasion, who cause harm or put the overall program or other students in jeopardy. And so no one is saying that because we shift the zero tolerance policy that we negate the notion of accountability. In fact, you'll find that students on campus and staff on campus are all in agreement that we need to ensure that folks who really want to be in this environment are doing their very level best, because no one wants the program to be jeopardized in that way. But when you think about positive behavioral interventions, we look at our success rate for students that have tested positive for marijuana use or substance use that go through the program. 4 out of 5 of them end up with a negative test when they test the second time. So we know for a fact that once staff have the opportunity to work with students, to change their behavior, to help them understand why they need to shift, that we see a significant outcome and a significant turn. And so in this process, our campuses are fully aware of the need for accountability, but also acutely aware that we need a different approach than just simply saying, oh, you tested positive. I'll use this quick example. If I were going to a center next weekend and I was in an area where I may have used marijuana or whatever I was doing that weekend, like any student who would go to college, we would end up having a great time that particular weekend. And then you show up on Monday and all of the things you did, you're now paying for in that test. And we say, I'm so sorry, this no longer works for you. We've got to think differently about the approach, which I believe folks are in agreement with. It's a matter of how do we nuance the language in a way that protects the accountability, but also provides flexibility, accounting for who our students truly are and the backgrounds that they come from.
Thank you so much. And I yield back my time, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Meek. And now Representative Castro.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I wanted to ask y'all how you help students navigate those who are trying to attain a degree, a credential. What often is a work school tug of war, particularly for low-income students who come from backgrounds where their families can't just pay the full bill for them to go to college, and yet financial aid is not enough. So they're having to work sometimes many hours at a time, and that work is sometimes interfering with their ability to complete their schooling. And how do we navigate that? How do we help them navigate that? And what should we do about it?
Congressman, if I could jump in here, I think one thing that we are lacking in this country is a real continuum of work-based learning opportunities. Apprenticeship is a very familiar model of an earn and learn model. Summer youth employment is another way that we think about it. But we need a much more integrated continuum, starting in middle school, that includes our higher ed system, that includes our workforce system, that gives young people agency in choosing the kind of program where they can earn, where they can learn, where they can take care of family members. There are lots of examples of this in other countries, and there are some cities that are doing this well. So we just need to replicate those kind of models.
Because we never, for folks that are trying to complete their degree, for example, you don't want them to be so engaged in work that work becomes a distraction from the goal that they're trying to achieve, right? Which is ultimately to get their 2-year degree or their 4-year degree and then go into their career field. But in my hometown of San Antonio over the years, I've seen many people who have been stuck in this work school tug of war for quite a while. And ultimately work ends up winning out and they give up on their ultimate dream of being a nurse or a doctor or an engineer, or whatever it is, because they were never able to get out of that work school tug of war. And so I raise that issue just because I've seen a lot of students who are stuck in it. I believe, for example, that we ought to expand Pell Grants, as I think a lot of us on this Zoom call believe, that also that we should make things like community college free, that we should cancel some student debt and so forth. But we're not there yet on those policies. And so I wanted to get y'all's perspective on how we deal with that very real situation that so many students are facing.
And Congressman Castro, if I could, and thank you for being a caucus member for us for Job Corps. I realize you're speaking about it in the context of post-secondary and going on the higher ed.
Sure.
I just want to call out a clear example too, for students who are on the other end of the spectrum who are not quite there yet. That's one of the reasons we see that our centers provide childcare and like Head Start programs so that the student is able to focus on their academic requirement, whether that's getting their credential or their GED or diploma, while at the same time getting their career piece. And we've seen that model work really well because students grapple, to your point, with so many different issues and trying to navigate the space. On our end, and for the students that we really serve, we found that being able to look at the totality of the students and trying to figure out how do you support their needs across the board, it makes a fundamental difference for them to stay focused on what they need to do academically while they're also pursuing their career opportunity. Just wanted to add that for folks who may not have that level of awareness, and we certainly appreciate your continued support.
No, absolutely.
Councilman Castro, I'd
Please.
also I'd like to offer an example from the community college that I think could be particularly instructive. We have a single stop model where students are able to get multiple needs met and also maximize public benefits towards their education. So I do think that one strategy to managing this tension is to make students more aware of the resources that are available with them to help alleviate some of those burdens so that they can navigate the basic needs while they pursue their education. And additionally, as a student who worked 2 part-time jobs and graduated a year early from an Ivy League institution, I understand how challenging it can be. We have to empower students and help them plan and navigate towards the end game, which is achieving the diploma. You have to be able, so enhanced case management, support for professional development, those are the types of recommendations that will equip adults to support students very differently as they travel along this path.
No, well, thank y'all. I am a caucus member, and thank you for all the work that y'all are doing for folks around the
Could
country.
I speak as an employer, if you don't mind, real quick?
Yeah,
This is
of
where
course.
short-term
Yes.
Pell Grants come into play. We, as an employer, have most recently started some part-time work. That's non-traditional. We stepped out of the regular, 4-10 schedule. We went to the community college when we needed skilled welders, and we said, "You're in school. What's your school schedule? What can we do
That's
to work
great.
around it?" So we just thought out of the box. So short-term Pell Grants, definitely, that's got to be expanded. So thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. I yield back to your woman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now Representative Good.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses. It's a privilege to engage with you all today on these topics. We obviously have issues as a country with youth unemployment, especially among those most disadvantaged, most at risk, and most vulnerable. We also have major issues as a country with out of control government spending that is excessive, to say the least, poorly targeted to address real issues, terribly mismanaged, and at best, so often shows little to no positive results. The real issue plaguing our society is the breakdown of the traditional family structure, which is the #1 cause of poverty and other social ills. More government spending does nothing to improve this and often incentivizes the wrong things, the wrong behaviors, and therefore makes things worse. So many government policies undermine marriage, the family, our founding Judeo-Christian values, and even important fundamentals such as work ethic, self-reliance, and personal responsibility. I have people close to me who work as employment consultants for disadvantaged and at-risk individuals, and they are extremely inhibited in their ability to help those who won't take a job as long as Democrats keep giving them enhanced unemployment. This is just another example of Democrat spending that makes the problem worse instead of better. Business owners will tell you, along with the help wanted signs that we see posted everywhere and the nationwide backlog in manufacturing, all tell us that this enhanced unemployment is making things worse and keeping people from taking jobs. The Democrat policies that caused our $30 trillion deficit, runaway inflation that we're starting to experience, including specifically soaring education, healthcare costs, and energy costs that are skyrocketing because of reduced American energy production, these crazy climate and environmental restrictions on the industry. And this is all before the recent cyber attacks on our infrastructure. All of this increased cost, increased inflation, increased energy, healthcare, and education costs. This all disproportionately impacts these lower income youths who we say that we want to help. Of course, my friends across the aisle have the same answer for everything. More money taken from the hard-working taxpayer money tree, regardless of the lack of evidence of results achieved other than isolated anecdotal examples. I share Ranking Member Fox's already expressed concerns about the problems with these programs and the lack of demonstrated results achieved. The aforementioned by Representative Fox, the 2018 GAO report, which showed that Job Corps had nearly 14,000 safety and security incidents in 1 year. That breaks down to an average of more than 100 per 120 centers throughout the country. So more than 100 on average for each of the 120 centers throughout the country, with half of those being drug-related incidents and assaults. Of course, the Democrats want to therefore make the drug offenses legal. And I hope they won't also make the assaults legal too after they eliminate our police and our correctional facilities. Furthermore, in a 2018 Department of Labor evaluation, Youth Build was shown to have a negligible effect on obtaining a college degree or work participation, despite $100 million in annual funding. Of course, Democrats will say, we just need to spend more money, since that's their measure of success. The more money we spend, the more successful we are. Look what we're doing for people. We're spending more money. I do have a question for Mr. Garrett, because the Old Dominion Job Corps Center is just outside my district, and they've highlighted some of their successes with my staff. But I know that how difficult, Mr. Garrett, it can be for job centers to be nimble and shift trade offerings to respond to employer needs. Often bureaucrats in Washington are making those decisions. Can you speak to how we can help in Washington, your ability to shift trade offerings and training offerings to meet the needs of employers?
Thanks for that, Congressman Good. And you're exactly right. The Old Dominion Job Corps Center, just outside of Lynchburg, as you know, has a phenomenal relationship. And many employers that you talk about, folks going back to work, like McLaren Corporation and Windboy Electric, directly in the area, they've already expressed the need for highly skilled and motivated employees, which oftentimes they receive from the Old Dominion Job Corps Center. And this notion how we can become more flexible, agile, and nimble so that we can meet the needs of those employers or market, or one of the things we hope that the subcommittee and the ultimate committee will tackle to lessen that requirement of how DOL has to make the final authority and offer the local campus that ability to really make the adjustment, working in tandem with the local employer to meet their needs, where students are ultimately going to be placed. And I used the example earlier, and I'll cite it again for reference. We know that if a corporation approaches a center, we shouldn't wait 9 months to get an approval for an official trade when we know that jobs are going to be available in 6 to 9 or 12 months. Instead, that local campus should have the authority and autonomy and then be judged based upon their performance, right? But they're doing that in partnership to meet the local demands in the communities, so that those students, when they complete their program, can go directly to work and be a valuable contributing citizen in that respective market.
Well, my time has expired. Thank you for your answer. And I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Courtney, Representative Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And again, I think the kickoff of the reauthorization of Wioa today is, again, a really exciting opportunity for good bipartisan support. And I don't just say that, as a sentiment. I was around in 2014 when we had the bill signing ceremony at the Executive Office Building when the last Wioa was authorized, and we had Virginia Fox and we had John Klein, the Republican chairman of the Education and Labor Committee, and we had Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and it was a bipartisan love fest when that bill was signed into law. And but it was not the 10 commandments. We certainly need to revisit some of the provisions, and I want to thank all the witnesses today for their really thoughtful input, because I'm very optimistic that we move forward. By the way, with the job numbers that came out last week, I think it's important to drill down a little bit deeper into the data. And actually, if you look, it was low-wage workers where you had the highest number of job growth in that report. In fact, the cohort, which was where I think the biggest sort of frustration, and I think all of us were frustrated, was actually more higher skilled, higher wage jobs that were not filled in the economy. And that is precisely what we're talking about today, which is trying to close that gap with a job training system that will get people the skills they need to succeed at a higher level. Madam Chairwoman, you have talked a little bit about the well-intentioned language, which is in the 2014 bill to allocate 75% for out-of-school youth. Again, it was well-intentioned. I think, you know, we thought that was really where the need was the greatest, but obviously I'm hearing from my workforce board that really has been pretty clunky in terms of trying to get the help out to, you know, the broadest number of people that could benefit from the workforce programs that they have. And Mr. Showalter, maybe, you know, I know you talked about it a little bit in your testimony as well, but I mean, at some point we actually do have to put pen to paper. I mean, can you give us a little more sort of input about how you would sort of fix that problem?
Congressman, I would love to help you put pen to paper. As you may know, I was on the staff for Chairman Kennedy and Harkin when we were initially negotiating what became Wioa. And the in-school youth, out-of-school youth distinction is a carryover from previous laws. That was the framework within which we could move at the time. And I do think it's critically important that we stay focused on the fact that this is one of the only federal funding streams designed to connect young people with barriers to employment, to education and work. So I think the most important thing is to maintain that intent. In my written testimony, I provide a way of kind of getting past the in-school youth, out-of-school distinction, which is clunky and makes eligibility too complicated. We propose a simpler priority populations framework is what we called it, where it's purely based on types of young people. And the other critical part of that is allowing for self-attestation, which DOL has already issued guidance on, many states allow, but allowing young people to say, I'm experiencing homelessness, I'm connected to the justice system, without having to bring 15 documents with them, would also make work so much easier for providers and workforce boards to implement this law.
Great, well, thank you. And Ms. Fulmer Townsend, I don't know if you maybe wanted to comment on that, about how we can make this, you know, again, a much more flexible sort of program to get the best, you know, the furthest success.
We definitely support Mr. Showalter's recommendations regarding the priority population, but also simplifying eligibility. It is triggering and traumatizing to constantly relive your pain in order to get help. And I think that we could do a better job of making services more available to young people faster by having less eligibility restrictions for the use of the services. And self-attestation would help when they have challenges to secure some of the documentation that's currently required.
Great. And one quick question for you. Again, our workforce board, which just got an award last year as a pioneer for their manufacturing pipeline program for the shipyard, they work with unions. The metal trade unions were part of the curriculum that was developed that has been so successful. I mean, can you talk about the value of reaching out to unions as we sort of, you know,
Absolutely.
develop? Yeah.
Congratulations on your award. I think innovative partnerships like the one you described is a firm step forward in making sure that young people are prepared for jobs. It is important to look at the requirements of an industry and to engage those industry leaders in the process to prepare young people in terms of training, in terms of opportunities for work, and especially in the advanced space. And so I do think that it's a critical strategy that we should see more of throughout this country.
Great, thank you. I yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. And now, Ms. McLean of Michigan.
Hey, good morning, or I should say good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I do have to tell you, I love your hat. Always makes me happy. A couple comments first is, as you know, I'm new to Congress, but it's so refreshing to hear
the business community as well as the young people's program actually working together and having a partnership of togetherness with the youth community programs as well as the businesses. So often I think we look at businesses as our enemy, as opposed to these are the people and the entities that actually provide the opportunities. So I can't tell you how refreshing that is, as well as it's very refreshing to hear again how important it is that we're focusing on what outcomes do we need for our youth. Because as a former business owner, it's very important to make sure that when we get people, employees, that their skills match our needs. So again, I'm happy to hear this. My biggest question is for you, Mr. Garrett, is coming out of this pandemic, there's thousands of young Americans who can benefit from Job Corps right now and need meaningful employment. Many are likely single parents from whom there is a desperate urgency to be able to enroll in Job Corps, so they can be housed and begin their career development. I'm questioning is, have you resumed in-person learning? Are you open for in-person development?
Yeah, great question, Congresswoman McClain. So Job Corps centers have resumed in-person operations at most sites and returned many of our existing students. In some cases, we're awaiting approval from the Department of Labor to officially enroll new students. But I understand we're almost about to turn that particular corner. The other thing you should know is that every Job Corps center has also submitted a plan to begin virtual enrollments, expediting that process to help students who were not already on the books, but new students begin to transition into in-person learning as well. I would just tell you that, the federal government's policy approval process, though, it can be laborious and slow moving at times. And as a former business owner, that doesn't help anyone when you got a student saying, I don't have months to wait. I need an immediate solution now, and you have bed and space. We shouldn't have a federal process in place that prevents that student from getting to where they need to be. But yes, resumption has begun in most cases, and many of the students have returned.
Good. It's so refreshing again, and I keep using that word and hopeful in terms of we can figure out how to keep everyone safe and that's the operative word, and be productive. Mr. Showalter, I have a question for you as well. As one of the problems you discussed earlier was in your testimony was that of rural opportunity deserts, where the disconnection rates among young people they're almost 4 times greater. What are the primary drivers of this rural-urban divide? Because I have a very much a rural community in my district. And how can we improve it? How can we help?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. As you might or might not know, I am actually from a small town in Oklahoma. When I was a kid there, one of the biggest employers was Mercury Marine, which makes motorboat engines. They left when I was a kid. And I've seen what's happened to a lot of our rural communities. As a side note, I think like a lot of us, we'll all be very interested to see kind of what happens as remote work picks up and whether that results in kind of some increases in population in some rural parts of our country. But something to underline, that a quote that sticks with me is one of my former board members who is a youth director at a workforce board who works in a large city. She said, we talk about this system like it's a system, but once you get outside the large systems in a lot of our states, it's not a system. There's a patchwork of programs, but there aren't a lot of opportunities. And the workforce board, there isn't enough funding for it to act as that convener that's really needed to knit together all the different kinds of service offerings, to build strong relationships with employers, to work with economic development, to bring in new employers. So there's really a lack of infrastructure in a lot of our areas. We have over 500 workforce boards. A lot of those are operating as they're on $1-2 million.
So it's an employer issue.
Budgets.
Is it more of an employer issue where we need to bring more employers to those rural areas?
Yes, and I think we can do that, especially with the rise of remote working. I would love to see that.
Thank you. With my time, I yield back.
Okay, thank you so much. And now you're from Representative Bonamici.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Wilson. Thank you, Ranking Member Murphy, but truly thank you to our witnesses for this important conversation today. It's been a really tough year, and during throughout, in fact, this economic turmoil. Our workforce system has been nimble and important and a way to support workers. I've had many conversations with local workforce boards, community colleges, labor unions, community-based organizations from across Northwest Oregon. You know, they're working on supporting displaced and underemployed workers and getting them the skills they need. And they're striving to provide those workers, particularly those with barriers to employment, with the skills they need for meaningful employment. But we know that far too many workers, including many opportunity youth, really lack adequate housing, childcare, transportation, and other supportive services they need to succeed to get through the training, but also once they get into these good paying jobs. So we know that our workforce system has been chronically underfunded. And I don't know if Mr. Courtney's still with us, but I was there as well on that day, and bipartisan day in July of 2014 when the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was signed into law. And as we reauthorize it, strengthening these investments in workforce programs and the support services will help us truly build back better. So I want to ask Ms. Fulmer Townsend, you were talking about this a bit in response to Mr. Courtney's question, but what barriers do the students typically face in the WIOA youth programs, and how does Philadelphia Youth Network help the students overcome these barriers?
Thank you for that question. In our experience, the barriers range depending on circumstances, but some that we see are lack of childcare assistance. Sometimes they need approval for the childcare subsidy, and that approval doesn't come in time for the enrollment courses. Courses operate in 6, 8, or 12-week increments, and so you might miss the start of a next class because you don't have the adequate childcare. We definitely see insecure housing. And so what we see is not necessarily what you would define as traditional homelessness, but really a lot of couch surfing. And it takes a little while to discover that, right? I'm staying with my friends. You don't have a problem until your friend's parents say you can't stay here any longer. I'm staying with my cousin. And so it's a pattern of behavior that the professionals have to be really keen to observe in order to understand that this housing insecurity is really a challenge. One of the things that I'm proud of is at the Community College of Philadelphia, they're working with our housing authority to provide housing for those students. And we also see independent living programs through our Department of Human Services be really helpful in this space. Additionally, we do see the need for enhanced mental health services and sometimes emotional supports. And so being able to connect young people with substance abuse treatment and support for their mental health needs is another thing that we see. And how do we close the gap between behavioral health entities and their requirements and the requirements of the program?
I appreciate that. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I really want to get a question in for Mr. Garrett, and my time is running out. Mr. Garrett, I represent Tongue Point Job Corps in Astoria, as well as the Pivot Partners in Vocational Opportunity Training in Northwest Portland. And at these centers, we know students who have faced challenges in the traditional education system can really thrive academically and earn credentials and practical skills. Welding, seamanship, which is really important on the coast, landscaping, and others. On this committee, we frequently hear about the need to prepare for the future of work. And technological changes in our workplaces will likely require the majority of workers, including youth, to reskill or upskill to remain competitive. So what resources would Job Corps centers need to better help students prepare for the future of work? And what are the current barriers to Job Corps programs offering opportunities for the sort of in-demand skills and competencies?
Great question, and thank you for your continued support, Congresswoman Bonamici. And as you know, the students from Tongue Point and from the Pivot Satellite Center, we've seen about almost a little less than 80% of them have success rate being placed in employment and higher education or going into the military.
And they're very supported by the communities.
Yeah, and I was going to say it. So at the local level, we really believe that the partnership with the business community, trying to determine what are the future needs and trends, and then working with the center to then identify what trades need to be structured to meet that projection. Again, I'll just reiterate this notion that at times the slowdown process at the Department of Labor in getting the approval for a new trade or a new opportunity sometimes can pose a barrier. They work through it, but sometimes we miss the window, right? You miss the curve because an employer is going to say, either I need to pick another market or I need to pick another partner to help deliver this. And so our students recognize that as well, because they too want the new in-demand jobs that are also high wage. And so we continue to work in partnership and hope the committee continues to urge the notion of figuring out how we streamline that approval process for new trades and opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. And my time has expired, but I know that we're all willing to work on breaking down those barriers. So I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barger, Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Murphy and all the witnesses. It's a big deal, and I'm very involved in workforce development and getting these young people trained. That's most imperative, especially those that don't have an opportunity. We want to give them an opportunity to be contributing to the workforce. I mean, we need them, and you know, these programs will do that if employers are on board and at the table, and the system is focused on meeting those young people's needs. While we're discussing the Wioa youth programs, I'd like to bring attention to the importance of occupational licensing reform. There's this licensing requirements affect approximately 25% of employees nationwide, and that number is far higher for lower wage occupations. Many of these professions are taught at programs like Job Corps, and they require an occupational license, and the burden of acquiring that license keeps a lot of those people out of the workforce. Since these licensing requirements is a barrier for entrance into the workforce, if we're spending money on programs to get Americans to work without fighting these licensing requirements, we're really kicking ourselves in the foot. And I do have a bill I want you to know. It's called the Freedom to Work Act. It's HR 3145 that amends Wioa by requiring states to include their plan to reduce and how to reduce occupational licensing burdens as part of the Wioa state plan. Any Wioa reauthorization bill should include those provisions to reduce occupational licensing burdens on those workers. And I do have a question for Ms. Linder. I know that one of the challenges, as we've already spoken about, is many employers are faced with school closures, and it's forced parents to who would otherwise be looking to re-enter the workforce. They have to stay at home and take care of that child or their children. In particular, this has inversely impacted women. Has your company faced difficulties with recruiting those women workers because they've been forced to homeschool their children or stay at home with those children?
Good question. Good point. Currently, I'm not seeing it per se, but I know that back in 2020, when we were coming back from, we were ramping back up after furloughing the majority of our workforce. We knew that we would have, whether it be men, women, fathers, mothers, or what have you, that they may not be able to come back. So we put out a program, asking, do you have an issue working full time? And we had several people come forth. And so we worked around part-time work. We worked around to make it work. Now that we're actually full scaling back up, there are technically probably, I would say, less females and some single fathers on top of it not coming back to the workforce. And we're recognizing that. That's why I think I've said I've got to be out of the box thinking when it comes to hiring future candidates into our workforce. The traditional isn't working. I'm reaching out to my workforce partners asking for help. I don't know if I have the exact one answer, but I know that what I was doing pre-COVID isn't working, and I've got to change as an employer. I've got to think differently. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not just you, it's everybody. We're looking for people. Doesn't matter what profession you're in either. And we're trying to get people into the workforce to teach them a skill, to make them productive, to give them a future in a trade and something they can carry on. And it's hard. I mean, I'm a pharmacist, and it's hard to get people to work in the pharmacy because in some instances with certain jobs, they are staying out. So, and especially women, because they do have to take care of those children. But it's an ongoing need, and it's good that you're thinking differently. And when you find that answer, please report back to us. That'd be fantastic. And know we're working for you too. Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from the distinguished chair of our entire committee, the Education and Labor Committee, Dr. Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Murphy. I'd like to start my questions with Mr. Garrett. Mr. Garrett, the ranking member of the full committee asked you about all the deaths that were happening on campus and in the Job Corps program. And I'm looking at a chart that confirms that in fact people do die per 100,000 people on a Job Corps site who live on a Job Corps site. About 4.26 per 100,000 die. If you're at the Job Corps program but not on site, it's 25.5. But the national average, this is mortality rate, is 74.9, which suggests that your 6%, your 6% is likely to die if you're on campus than if you're just in the community. And the in the homicide rate, if you're in a Job Corps program, this chart says it's 4 per 100,000, but 11.9, almost 12, almost 3 times more in the community. Is that what you meant by the Job Corps is one of the safest places you could be?
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and you are exactly right. And I appreciate the additional statistics because you're right. A person is 3 times more likely to potentially die from a homicide by not being on center. We know for a fact the severity of the situations that many of our students face who are either homeless, transient, or their immediate family environment and going from pillar to post, that they are safer being on our campus. That does not mean we don't have issues and challenges like programs do, but what we know not only from anecdote, but from the data, as you just shared, that students not only are safe and secure, but they're also getting the education needs that they have, the behavioral management in place so that they can then be an employable citizen. And we see significant differences as a student matriculates throughout our program.
Thank you. And Mr. Garrett, according to appropriations, the program is getting about $200 million less each year than is authorized under Wioa. How does that shortfall affect your ability to fulfill your mission?
Well, sir, we have a number of issues. As I talked about, getting trade approval or if new materials and requirements or equipment is required, that's one piece of it. One of the more alarming pieces that affects almost every campus in this country is the continued underfunding from a construction perspective in terms of the requirements that are needed to either update centers or to upskill them so that our students can not only continue to be safe if it's fencing that's required, but also have access to the appropriate equipment they need. And so it has gone for a period of time. The other piece of that conversation is also because of the enrollment pause or freeze in 2012, where we lowered the number of available slots by 18%, even if we were at full capacity, meaning we meet the DOL number, we still have space. And so there's still an opportunity for us to figure out a better solution for that, to actually get back to our original numbers so that we can fulfill the mission and have more students actually available and avail themselves of the opportunity.
Thank you. And Ms. Fulmore Townsend, do you have any statistics about the impact summer youth employment has on violent crime rates?
Yes, we do. We just recently received a report from Dr. Heller about our work in 2017 and 2018. And the research is showing that it not only encourages productive behavior, it decreases incidences of violent crime and exposure to risk factors for violence in Philadelphia.
Is it significant enough to show cost savings? The one study in Chicago said they saved so much with the summer jobs program that they reduced crime so much that they save so much in future prison and whatnot that they paid for the whole program.
We don't quite boast those statistics as Chicago because our sample size was a little bit smaller and our strategy is a little bit different than Chicago. However, we are working with Dr. Heller to estimate the cost savings of our approach.
You showed, thank you for mentioning the Opening Doors for Youth Act. We're going to introduce that in a few days, but you indicated a little frustration about the 75% being required for out of school or out of work rather than for prevention. Can you say a word about that?
Sure. We endorsed the priority population format that Mr. Showalter talked about, which would allow us to look at different groups of young people and make them eligible rather than forcing communities to limit their approach based on the 75% funding split.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My time has expired.
Thank you. Now we'll hear questions from Ms. Letlow of Louisiana. Welcome.
Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, members of the subcommittee and witnesses, thank you for taking the time to discuss opportunities for youth employment under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's important that Wioa has dedicated resources aimed at preparing young adults for fulfilling careers. Programs like Youth Build are benefiting individuals in my district, providing education and workforce development for out-of-school youth. North Shore Technical Community College in Bogalusa hosts a Youth Build program that focuses on teaching carpentry skills. Students are able to gain 2 industry-recognized certifications. While participating in the program, students obtain a GED and have the opportunity to learn important life and leadership skills. Congress should ensure our youth are well prepared to enter the workforce. I believe that employers must be part of the discussion when it comes to workforce education. Having input from businesses on their needs creates meaningful workforce development, which will lead to higher employment rates. My question is for Ms. Fulmore Townsend. You mentioned that Philadelphia Youth Network Career Development Framework was designed to translate the expectations of employers into attainable skills and incorporated into other organizations' programming. PYN chose not to make this framework industry specific and instead focused on providing skills that all employers are looking for when hiring young people. What feedback have you gotten from employers on what those general skills include? Is there a particular model you use to impart those skills to young people? Is this a model that other programs beyond Philadelphia could adopt?
Thank you so much for your question. So the first answer is yes, our career development framework can be applied in other communities and has been. We took our approach and our cues from employers directly who consistently told us, we will teach our employees our employer specific skills. We will teach them how to do it our way. We need them to show up ready to learn those things. And the things that they wanted them to show up with are self-direction and initiative, the ability to communicate with others, the ability to work in a team, the ability to negotiate and be persuasive. And so with that feedback, we looked at it and said, every industry is willing to teach you how to be the best employee for company X. What they want you to do is show up ready to be that. And we focus on what are the skills to show up ready to do that. Additionally, with the framework, I will add, it is divided into developmentally appropriate strategies. So we differentiate between early work experience, intermediate level work experience, and advanced training and work experiences for young people so that we can match the activity to the developmental needs, and that leads to higher results.
Great, thank you so much for your comments. Chairwoman, I yield back.
Oh, thank you so much. I believe we have exhausted all of our questioning. And so I want to remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission for the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing. So by close of business on May 27, 2021, preferably in Microsoft Word format. The materials submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Only a member of the subcommittee or an invited witness may submit materials for inclusion in the hearing record. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated into the record by way of an internet link that you must provide to the committee clerk within the required time frame. But please recognize that in the future, that link may no longer work. Pursuant to House rules and regulations, items for the record should be submitted to the clerk electronically by emailing submission to educationandlabor.hearings@mail.house.gov. Again, I want to thank our fabulous witnesses. I mean, this has been a very informative committee hearing. I want to thank each of you for your participation today. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for you, and we ask the witnesses to please respond to those questions as in writing. The hearing record will be held open for 14 days in order to receive these reports. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to the committee practice, witnesses' questions for the hearing record must be submitted to the majority committee staff or committee clerk within 7 days. The questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. I now recognize the distinguished member, Representative Murphy, for a closing statement. Dr. Murphy, you still with us?
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I want to thank all the committee members and our witnesses again for sharing more about the wonderful and hard work that you're doing and offering recommendations on how we can best serve our nation's youth through the workforce system. There's clearly an issue that has been problematic and worse, and even made worse by COVID with closures of businesses and schools across the country. Let me take this off because then I can actually speak.
Dr. Murphy is a medical doctor. You all must know that.
Sorry for that delay. I'm encouraged that the conversation today was done in a wholly bipartisan manner, that we discussed the reauthorization of Wioa. However, there clearly remains that work that needs to be done improving the operation of these programs so that we can keep our youth safe and begin them on pathways for successful careers. I appreciate that we were able to discuss this with the need for increased employer engagement so that our federal dollars are going towards programs that actually meet the needs of industry partners. The business engagement and voice, along with the renewed focus on accountability and performance for taxpayer dollars, will serve our young people well. We cannot simply just pour money after programs that are not accountable, that are not working, and improve. There's always room for improvement and refinement in getting these programs successful. Thank you again to our witnesses and to the chair for convening this very wonderful and very productive bipartisan hearing. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making my closing statement. I want to thank you again to all of our wonderful witnesses for your testimonies and for helping launch a series of bipartisan hearings on reauthorizing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. As we discussed today, WIOA is the foundation of our nation's workforce development programs, particularly for young people. In communities across the nation, these programs play a critical role in creating opportunities for young people to succeed, both in the workforce and throughout their life. But as we heard from our expert witness today, many of these programs face chronic underfunding and structural obstacles that prevent them from achieving their full potential. Now is the time for us to build on the broad support of the WIOA and strengthen these critical services for the millions of young people who urgently need them, particularly now during this pandemic. To that end, I'm grateful to my colleagues for contributing to a productive and fruitful hearing. Today, we not only established that WIOA reauthorization must include investments in youth workforce activities, youth bill, and Job Corps. But we also laid a strong foundation for our forthcoming hearings to discuss principles for this reauthorization. I look forward to continuing today's discussion with all of my colleagues as we work towards providing all young people with the support they need to lead fulfilling lives and strengthen our communities. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. And thank you.